What's up, everybody? Jeffrey Bannock here. How you doing? Hope you have an amazing day. Getting into reading the Bible. We're reading Leviticus 12 through 15 and Matthew 12:15. It's interesting since now we're getting to a lot of like the law and things like that and getting caught up. I'm finding that there's a lot more like laws laid out in Leviticus, which I'm finding very interesting. So it looks like we are live. What's up, everybody? Thanks anyone that ever watches. And here we go. We're going to jump into it. Leviticus 12 through 15 and Matthew 12:15. Purification after childbirth. So this must be what baptisms after childbirth probably comes from. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the eighth day, the boy is to be circumcised. Then the woman must wait 33 days to be, why 33, I wonder, to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred or go to the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over. That's interesting that even though birth is such a beautiful thing and everything, they're making that out to be in periods and all that they're making out to be. They use blood and so much other stuff, but here they're like, yeah, she can't come around if she's on that time of the month. She can't go around anything. She's unclean. It's just interesting. If she gives birth to a daughter for 2 weeks, the woman will be unclean just during her period. Well, so like 2 weeks out of so like half the month, a woman's considered unclean. So if you're 2 weeks, it says as during her period. So if she's 2 weeks, or are they saying she's equal? Maybe they're saying she's unequal to her period because that would suck if every month 2 weeks you're considered unclean. When the days of purification for a son are over, she is to bring the priest to the entrance to the tent of meeting. When the days of purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering and a young pigeon or dove for a sin offering. I wonder why the sin offering? Like what's the sin that's been committed if they just had a child? Why is that? Is that just in preparatory? Is that like pre-sinning and they're just doing it because they know people are human and they'll eventually sin? I don't know. He shall offer them the Lord to make atonement for her. Then she will be ceremonially clean from her flow of blood. These are the regulations for the woman who gives birth to a boy or a girl. But if she cannot afford a lamb, she is to bring 2 doves and 2 young pigeons, one for a burnt offering and one for a sin offering. This way the priest may make atonement for her and she will be clean. Right. Leviticus 13. This is regulations about defiling disease or skin diseases. Hmm. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, I guess skin disease used to be like a really big thing with like leprosy and different stuff. They speak about stuff like that a lot. So I guess that must be, we've pretty much done away with that stuff now. But I imagine back then that must have been a pretty big deal. So when anyone has swelling or rash or a shiny spot on their skin, they may be be a defiling skin disease. They must be brought to Aaron, the priest, or one of the sons who is a priest. The priest is to examine the sore on the skin, and if the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to be more than skin deep, it is a defiling skin disease. When the priest examines the person, he shall pronounce him ceremonially unclean. If the shiny spot on the skin is white but does not appear to be more than a skin deep, and the hair on it is not turned white, the priest is to isolate the affected area or the affected person for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine them, and if he sees the sores unchanged and is not spreading the skin, he is to isolate them for another 7 days. Wow, interesting. If on the seventh day the priest examine them again, and if the sore has faded and it and has not spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce them clean. It is only a rash. They must wash their clothes and they will be clean. But if the rash does spread in their skin after they've shown themselves to the priest to be pronounced unclean, they must appear before the priest again. The priest shall examine that person, and if the rash is spread in the skin, he shall announce him unclean. It is a defiling skin disease. When anyone has defiled a defiling skin disease, they must be brought to the priest. The priest is to examine them, and if there is a white swelling in the skin, ugh, white swelling in the skin. That has turned the hair white. I think it's interesting that this white hair thing. I have a medical background and nowhere ever have we used white hair as an indicator for anything. And if there is raw flesh in the swelling, ooh, it is a chronic skin disease, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. Ugh, that's nasty. Nasty. Oh, here we are. 11. Is a chronic skin disease, and the priest shall pronounce them unclean. He is not to isolate them because they are already unclean. If the disease breaks out all over their skin, and so far as the priest can see it, it covers all the skin of the affected person from head to foot, the priest is to examine them, and if the disease is covering their whole body, he should pronounce him clean. Huh? If the affected person, if it covers them from head to foot, it covers since it has turned white there. Huh, interesting. But whenever raw flesh appears on them, they will be unclean. Ah, so he's talking about like the sores have healed up. So even if they have like leprosy or them all over, they're considering him clean when they're white because they've healed up. But when they're raw flesh, when they're like boils, pussy boils type stuff, then they're unclean, is how I'm taking this. So when priest sees raw flesh, you should pronounce them unclean. The raw flesh is unclean. They have a defiling disease. If the raw flesh changes and turns white, they must go to the priest. The priest is to examine them, and if the sores have turned white, the priest shall announce the affected person clean. They then will be clean. So that makes sense now. That's like the scarring over, covering over is what they're talking about when it says turns white. That makes sense. I still don't get the whiteness of the hair yet, though. The priest examine it, and if the sores have turned white, the priest announces the affected person clean, blah, blah. Then when someone has a boil on their skin and it heals in places their boils of white, swelling, or reddish white spot appear, they must present them themselves to the priest. The priest is to examine it, and if it appears to be more than skin deep, the hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce the person unclean. This is a defiling disease that has broken out where the boil was. So it's like an underlying underskin infection is basically what's going on. It's really interesting knowing having as big of a background I do in medicine and then hearing that this is like their first, ever really like documentation of medicine. You know what I mean? Like this is like before when they're first. Well, if it's white but it's red on top, which is funny because erythema, which is the redness, is one of the signs of infection, and that's what they're doing here is they're looking at it, they're like, well, if it's red underneath, it's still unclean, it's infected, So I just thought that was sort of interesting. So, but when the priest examines it, where there are no white hair in it, and it is no more than skin deep and is faded, then the priest is to isolate them for 7 days. If it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce them unclean. It is a defiling disease. But if the spot is unchanged and has not spread, it is only a scar from the boil, and the priest shall pronounce them clean. Then someone has burnt when someone has burnt a burn on their skin and reddish or white spots appear in the raw flesh of the burn, the priest is to examine the spot, and if the hair is turned white, I don't get this white hair thing at all. I wish I have to look that up and figure that out. Why they think white hairs matter? Because they don't matter at all. I've got a couple in my head now, and I'm not even. Well, I'm pretty decently clean. Anyway, the priest examines the spot. If the hair is turned white and appears to be more than skin deep, is defiling disease is broke out in the burn. So I think they're calling defiling disease just infection to some degree, defiling the burn. The priest shall pronounce them unclean as defiling disease, and if the priest examines it and there's no white hair in the spot, and if it is not more than skin deep and is faded, the priest is to isolate them for 7 days. Interesting. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine that person, and if it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a defiling disease. If, however, the spot is unclean and is not spread in the skin, but is faded, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on their head or chin, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it appears to be more than skin deep and the hair in it is yellow and thin this time, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. Yellow and thin. Interesting. It is a defiling disease on the head or chin, defiling skin disease on the head or chin. But if the priest examines the sword and does not seem to be more than skin deep and there is no black hair in it, then the priest is to isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it has not spread, there is no yellow hair in it, it does not appear to be more than skin deep, then the man or woman must shave themselves except for the affected area. So everywhere but the area, and the priest will keep them isolated for another 7 days. That's interesting. So they're supposed to shave their whole body. Then the man or woman must shave themselves except for the affected area. Hmm. All right. On the seventh day, the priest examine the sore, and if it is not spread in the skin and appears to be no more than skin deep, the priest shall pronounce him clean. They must wash their clothes, and they will be clean. But if the sore does spread in the skin after they're pronounced clean, the priest must examine them, and if he finds the sore has spread in the skin and does not look he does not need to look for yellow hair. They are unclean. Okay. So if it spreads, the yellow, even if the yellow hair is unpresent, they're still unclean. Interesting. I still don't understand the yellow or black hair. Maybe that means something we're not seeing. If, however, the sore is unchanged so far as the priest can see, and if black hair is growing in it, the affected person is healed. And see, black hair, I mean, because they were from that region, everybody pretty much had black hair. So that that's just regular hairs growing out of it. They are clean, and the priest shall pronounce them clean. When a man or woman has white spots on their skin, the priest shall examine them, and if the spots are dull white, it is a harmless rash and has broken out on the skin. They are clean. A man who has lost his hair and is bald is clean. Oh, thank goodness I'm getting a little thin on top there. So that's 40 could have got me there. Leviticus, what is that? Leviticus, what are we on now? Which one? Leviticus 13. Leviticus 13:40. 13:40. Bald men are clean. It says so right there. A man who's lost all his hair is bald and clean. 40. There we go. Is if any person lost his hair, here we go. Uh, if he has lost his hair from the front of his scalp and his bald forehead, he is clean. If he has a reddish white sore on his head, or his bald head or forehead, it is the filing disease breaking out on his head or forehead. The priest is to examine him, and if the swollen sore on his head or forehead is reddish white, it is a defiling skin disease. The man is diseased and unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean because of the sore on his head. Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkept, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean!" Wow, that sucks. No one else up to now has had to do that. Anyone with such a defiling disease. Is that just talking about all defiling diseases or that one specifically? Hmm. Because that would suck. You got to wear torn clothes. You got to keep your hair unclean. You got to cover the lower part of their face. So what are they saying? Like a beard? Let their hair be unkept, cover the lower, it's like a beard. Unclean. As long as they have disease, they must remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. Wow. Regulations about defiling molds. As for any fabric that is spoiled with a defiling mold, a woolen or linen clothing, any woven or knitted material of linen or wool, any leather or anything made of leather, if the affected area in the fabric, if the affected area in the fabric, the leather, the woven or knitted material, or any leather article is greenish or reddish, it is defiling mold, and it must be shown to the priest. The priest is like, well, the priest was like just to go for everything around here, man. Anything, and see if anything. They were just like they were, I guess, just since they're related to God, they just figured they're the go-to for everything. The priests examine the affected area and isolate the article for 7 days. On the seventh days, it's funny, so everything's 7 days too. Again, from creation, but I just think that's even here, 7 days isolation. On the seventh day, he's to examine it, and if the mold is spread in the fabric, the woven or knitted material, or the leather material, whatever its use, It is a persistent defiling mold, and the article is unclean. He must burn the fabric, the woven or knitted material, or material of wool or linen, or any leather article that is spoiled, because the defiling mold is persistent. The article must be burned. But if the priest examine it and the mold is not spread in the fabric, the woven or knitted material, or the leather article, excuse me, he shall order the spoiled article washed. Then he is to isolate it for 7 days. After the article has been washed, the priest examine it again, and if the mold is not changed in appearance, even though it is not spread, it is unclean. Burn it no matter which side of the fabric has been spoiled. If when the priest examines it, the mold is faded after the article has been washed, he is to tear the spoiled part out of the fabric, the leather, or the woven or knitted material. But if it reappears in the fabric, in the woven or knitted material, or in the leather article, it is the spreading mold. Whatever has the mold must be burned. Any fabric or knitted material or leather article that has been washed and is rid of mold must be washed again, then it will be clean. These are the regulations concerning defiling molds in woolen or linen clothing, woven or knitted material, or any leather article, for pronouncing them clean or unclean. Interesting. Leviticus 14. Ooh, long. Um, Cleaning from defiling diseases. The Lord said to Moses, "These are the regulations for any diseased person at the time of their ceremonial cleaning when they are brought to the priest. The priest is to go outside the camp and examine them. If they have been healed of their defiling disease, the priest shall order that two live clean birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought to the person to be cleansed. Then the priest shall order that one of the birds be killed over the fresh water in a clay pot. He is then to take the live bird and dip it, together with the cedar wood, the scarlet yarn, and the hyssop, into the blood of the bird that has been killed over the fresh water. 7 times you shall sprinkle the one to be cleansed of the defiling disease, and then pronounce him clean. After that, he is to release the live bird into the open field. Interesting. The persons to be clean shall wash their clothes, shave off all their hair, and bathe with water. They will be ceremon- Then they will be ceremonially clean. After this, they may come to the camp, and they must stay outside the tent for 7 days. On the seventh day, they must shave off all their hair. They must shave their head, their beard, their eyebrows, the rest of their hair. They must wash their clothes and bathe themselves with water. They will be clean. I wonder, my eyebrows even too. Wow. On the 8th day, they must bring 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb to a year old, each without defect, along with 3/10 of an ephah of the finest flour, with olive oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. The priest who pronounces them clean shall present both the one to be cleansed and their offering before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then the priest is to take one of the male lambs and offer it as a guilt offering, along with the log of oil. He shall wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He is to slaughter the lamb in the sanctuary area where the sin offering and the burnt offering are slaughtered. Let the guilt offering, like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot. The priest shall take some of the log of oil, pour it on the palm of his own left hand, dip his right finger into the oil of his palm, and with this finger sprinkle some of it before the Lord 7 times. The priest is to put some of the remaining oil into his palm, on the lobe of his right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand and on the big toe of the right foot, on top of the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, and make atonement for them before the Lord. Then the priest is to sacrifice the sin offering and make atonement for the one to be cleansed for their uncleanliness. After that, the priest shall slaughter the burnt offering and offer it on the altar together with the grain offering, and make atonement for them, and they will be clean. If, however, they are poor and cannot afford these, they will make one they will take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved to make atonement for them, together with a tenth of ephah of the finest mix with olive oil for a grain offering, a log of oil, and two doves or two pigeons, such as they can afford, the one for a sin offering and one for a burnt offering. On the eighth day them they must bring them for their cleansing to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. The priest is to take the lamb for the guilt offering, together with the log of oil, and wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He shall slaughter the lamb for the guilt offering, and take some of its blood and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed. And let's see. And on the thumb of the right hand, on the big toe of the right foot. The priest is to pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and with his right forefinger sprinkle some of the oil from his palm 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil in his palm he is to put on the same places he put the blood of the guilt offering, on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of the right foot. The rest of oil is in his palm. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed, and make atonement for them before the Lord. Then he shall sacrifice the doves or the young pigeons, such as the person can afford. One is a sin offering, and the other is a burnt offering, together with the grain offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for before the Lord and on behalf of the one to be cleansed. These are the regulations for anyone who is defiling skin disease and cannot afford the regular offering for their cleansing from defiling molds. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as your possession, and I put a spreading mold in the house in your land, the owner of the house must go tell the priest, I have seen something that looks like a defiling mold in my house. The priest is to order the house to be emptied before he goes in to examine the mold, so that nothing in the house will be pronounced unclean. After this, the priest is to go in and inspect the house. He is to examine the mold on the walls, and if it's greenish or reddish depressions, that appears to be deeper than the surface of the wall, the priest shall go out to the doorway of the house and close it up for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest shall return and inspect the house. If the mold is spread on the walls, he is to order that the contaminated stones be torn out and thrown into an unclean place outside the town. He must have all the outside walls of the house scraped, and material that was scraped off dumped into an unclean place outside the town. They are to take other stones to replace these and take new clay and plaster the house. If the defiling mold reappears in the house after the stones have been torn out and the house has been scraped and plastered, the priest is to go and examine it. And if the mold has spread in the house, it is persistent defiling mold, the house is unclean. It must be torn down. Its stones, timbers, and all the plaster, and all taken plaster and taken out of the town to the an unclean place. That's like the unclean place is like the trash pile, the dump. Anyone who comes to the house while it is closed up will be unclean until evening. Anyone who sleeps or eats in the house must wash their clothes. But if the priest comes to examine it and mold is not spread after the house has been plastered, he should pronounce the house clean because the defiling mold is gone. To purify the house, he is to take 2 birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop. He is to kill one of the birds over fresh water in a clay pot. Then he is to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, and the live bird, dip them in the blood of the dead bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. He shall kill the one bird over the fresh water in a clay pot. Then he is to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, the live bird, dip them into the blood of the dead bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. You shall purify the house with the bird's blood, the fresh water, the live bird, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet yarn. Then he is to release the live bird in an open field outside the town. In this way, he'll make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. These are regulations for defiling any skin disease for a sore, for defiling molds in a fabric or a house, for any swelling, a rash, or a shiny spot. Determine something is clean or unclean. These are the regulations for defiling skin diseases and defiling molds. Okay, great time. Leviticus 15, last chapter on Leviticus before we go to Matthew. Discharges causing uncleanliness. Oh my goodness, this is really we're talking about discharge. This is The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when any man has an unusual body discharge, a discharge is unclean. Whether it continues flowing from his body or is blocked, it will make him unclean. This is his discharge will bring about an uncleanliness or uncleanness. Any bed the man has discharge lies on will be unclean, and anything he sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches his bed must wash their clothes and bathe with water. They will be unclean until evening. Whoever sits on anything that a man with a discharge set on must wash their clothes and bathe with water. They will be unclean till evening. Whoever touches the man who has a discharge must wash their clothes or bathe with water. They will be unclean till evening. If the man with a discharge spits on anyone who is clean, they must wash their clothes and bathe with water. They will be unclean till evening. Everything the man sits on when riding will be unclean, and whoever touches any of the things that were under him will be unclean till evening. Whoever picks up those things must wash their clothes and bathe with water. They will be unclean till evening. Anyone the man with discharge touches without rinsing his hands with water must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. The clay pot that the man touches must be broken, and any wood article is to be rinsed with water. When a man is cleansed from discharge, he is to count off 7 days from his ceremonial cleansing. He must wash his clothes and bathe himself with fresh water, and then he will be clean. On the 8th day, he must take 2 doves or 2 pigeons, come before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and give them to the priest. The priest is to sacrifice them, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. In this way, he will make atonement for the Lord and the man because of his discharge. Hmm. When a man has an emission of semen, he is to bathe his whole body with water, and he'll be unclean till evening. When a man has an emission of semen, so like a wet dream, is that what they're talking about? Wow. When a man has a emission of semen, or just in general, he must bathe his whole body with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any clothing or leather that has semen on it must be washed with water and is being unclean till evening. When a man has sexual relations with a woman, and there is any emission of semen, so it is distinct then. Both of them must bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. Then a woman has a regular flow of blood. The impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. Anything she lies on during her period will be unclean, and anything she sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches her bed will be unclean, and they must wash their clothes and bathe with water and will be unclean till evening. Anyone who touches anything she sits on will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water. They will become unclean till evening. Hmm. Whenever the bed, whether it is the bed or anything she is sitting on, when anyone touches it, they'll be unclean till evening. If a man has sexual relations with her and her monthly flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days. Any bed he lies on will be unclean. Oh wow. When a woman has a discharge of blood for many days at a time, other than her monthly period, if she has a discharge and continues beyond her period, she'll be unclean as long as she has a discharge, just as in the days of her period. Any bed she lies on will be, while her discharge continues, will be unclean, as her bed during her monthly period, and anything she sits on will be unclean as during her period. Anyone who touches them will be unclean. They must wash their hands or their clothes and bathe with water. They will be unclean until evening. When she is cleansed from her discharge, she must count off 7 days, and after that she'll be ceremoniously clean. Wow, that's a lot of uncleanliness. In the 8th day, they must take 2 doves. And so every month they have to sacrifice for a woman's period. Wow. No wonder that people are having such big families. They're like, we can't afford this every month. 2 doves, 2 pigeons. This is getting expensive. On the 8th day, she must take 2 doves or 2 pigeons and bring them to the priest to the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to sacrifice one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. In this way, he must make atonement for her before the Lord for her uncleanliness of her discharge. Wow. Must keep the Israelites separate from things and make them unclean, so they will not die of their uncleanliness for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them. These are regulations for a man with discharge, for anyone made unclean by emission of semen, for a woman on her monthly period, for a man or woman with a discharge, and a man who has sexual relations to a woman who is unclean. All right. All right. On to Matthew. Nice. That was interesting. Matthew 12 through 15. That was it. That was interesting. All right. Matthew 12 through 15. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. This is Matthew 12. At the time Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, his disciples were hungry and began to pick the heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." And Jesus answered, "Haven't you read that David did what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread. This was not lawful for them to do, but only for priests. Or you haven't read in the law that the priests on the Sabbath duty in the temple desecrated the Sabbath and yet are innocent? Or haven't you read the law that priests on Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath and yet are innocent? I tell you that something greater than temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Go on from that place, he went in, Going on from that place, he went into their synagogues. A man with a shriveled hand was there, looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus. They said to him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Any of you, if any of you has a sheep and it falls in the pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. Aware of this, withdrew from that place. A large crowd followed him, and he healed all that were ill. He warned them not to tell others about him. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. "Here is my servant who I have chosen, the one I love, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought through justice through to victory. In his names the nations will put their hope." Jesus and Jezebel. When they brought him a demon possessed man who was blind and mute, Jesus healed him so that he could both talk and see. All the people were astonished and said, "Could this be the son of David?" But the Pharisees heard this. When the Pharisees heard this, they said, "This is only Beelzebub, the prince of demons. This fellow drives out demons." Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How can his kingdom stand? And if I drive out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your people drive them out? So they can be, so then they will be your judges. But if it is the Spirit of God that I drive out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Or again, or again, how can anyone enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can plunder his house. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. And so I tell you, every kind of sin and slander can be forgiven, but blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. Anyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but anyone who speaks against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either in his age or in the age to come. Make a tree good and its fruit will be good. Make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of good stored up in him, an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. But I tell you that anyone who will give a good account, give give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken. But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they've spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. The sign of Jonah. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. He answered, A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it in exchange for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a large fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Oh, interesting. He compares Jonah's in the belly of the whale compared to his resurrection. And the men of Navahi Navahi will stand up and judge with his generations and condemn it, for they repent on the preaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to listen to Solomon's wisdom, seeing something great and now something greater than Solomon is here. When a pure spirit comes out of a person, in places it goes through in places seeking rest and does not find it. When it says, I will return to the house I left, when it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than the first. That is how that is how it will be with this wicked generation. Jesus' mother and brother. While Jesus was talking with the crowd, his mother and brother stood outside waiting for him to speak. Someone told him, Your mother and brothers are standing outside waiting to speak to you. He replied to them, Who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, Here are my mothers and my mother and brothers. Whoever does the will of the Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Hmm. Matthew 13. The parable of the sower. That same day Jesus came out of the house and said to the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. That'd be interesting. Could you imagine that? There's just so many people. You're like, dude, I got to get away from these people. I'm gonna get in this boat and go out there, and everybody's just still, this standing room only on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he scattered the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came up and ate it. Some fell along the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly, but the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seeds fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still others fell on good soil where it produced a crop. 160 and 30 times 160 or 30 times what it had sown. 160 or 30 times what it had sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. The disciples came to him and asked, What do you speak to the people in Why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given you, but not to them. Whoever has will give whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even they will make whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak in parables. Through seeing they will not see, through hearing they will not hear or they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will hear You will be ever hearing and never understanding. You will be ever seeing but never perceiving. For for this people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear with their ears and they have closed eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. You truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen when listen then to the parable of the sower Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When someone hears a message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil comes and snatches it away what's sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seeds fall on the rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. Then trouble or persecution comes because of the word and they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of their life and deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to anyone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. The parable of the weeds. Jesus told them there is another parable. The kingdom of heaven is just like a man who sowed good seed in a field. But while everyone was sleeping, the enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, the weeds also appeared. The owner's servant came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go up and pull them?" "No," he answered, "because while you're pulling weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let them grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burnt, then gather the wheat and bring it into the barn." The parable of the mustard seed and the yeast. He told another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Although it's the smallest of all seeds, when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, just so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them until an, he told them still another parable. The king of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with about 60 pounds of flour until he worked all through the dough. Jesus spoke through these things in the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through parables. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. The parable of the weeds explained. When he left the crowd, he went to the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." And he answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemies who sow them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. All the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, and will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out, and so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin, and they will all do evil. They will throw them into a blazing furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteousness, righteousness, righteousness will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear. The parable of the treasure and the pearl. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went out and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When they find one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. The parable of the net. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like the net that was thrown out in the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it is full, the fishermen it up on the shore. They set down and collected the good fish in baskets and threw the bad away. This is how they will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous. They will be thrown into the blazing fire, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures just as old. Prophet without honor, sorry. When Jesus had finished his parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. When did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name is Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where did this man get these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, or his own town and his own home," and did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Interesting. Matthew 14. John the Baptist beheaded. At the time of Herod, the te- te- tector- tectorach, te- te- tectorach, tectorach heard the report about Jesus and said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. This is why miraculous powers are working in him." Now Herod had arrested and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, "It is unlawful for you to have her." Wanted to kill John, but he's afraid of the people because they considered John a prophet. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guests and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me on a platter the head of John the Baptist." What terrible people. The king was distressed, but because of his oath and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request to be granted and had John beheaded in prison. His head was brought to her on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. His disciples came and took the body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. So what happened to the head? You just took it to the mother? What did the mother do with it? Was the mother like, was the mother possessed to ask to tell her daughter to do? I mean, like, there's a little bit of backstory going on there that I feel like we're missing out on. When Jesus heard what happened, he withdrew by boat privately s- to a solitary place. Hearing of this, crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the village and buy themselves some food." And Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. Bring them to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven and gave thanks and broke the loaves. And when he gave them to the disciple gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number who were fed were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Wow, that's amazing. Jesus walks on water. Immediately, Jesus said to the disciples, "Get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side," while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed him, he went on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already considered long distance from land, buffed, buff, buffed by the waves because the wind was against it. So the boat had been hit by the waves and had been taken out to the water. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "let me come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. Immediately that came to Jesus. But then when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith, why do you doubt?" But when they climbed in the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." When they crossed over, they landed in Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his clothes, and all that who touched it were healed. Matthew 15. That which defiles. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus before Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of elders? Don't they wash their hands before they eat?" They don't wash their hands before they eat. Jesus replied, "Why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help your mother or father is devoted to God, they do not honor their mother or father with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are mere human rules." Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen, understand. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth is what defiles them." Then the disciples came to him and asked, "Do you know what the Pharisees are offended? Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this?" And he replied, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them. They are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both fall into a pit." Peter said, "Explain this parable to us." "Are you so dull?" Jesus asked them. Wow, he's like, "Dude, are you guys stupid? What are you?" That's wow, that's sort of funny. If you think about it, that's sort of funny. Jesus like talked to him, and they're just like, "Dude, what are you talking about?" Jesus like, "Are you that stupid? Um, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out the body? But the things that come out of the person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating in unwashed hands does not defile them." The faith of the Canaanite woman. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre by Sidon. A Canaanite woman from the vicinity came out from him, crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. My daughter is demon possessed and suffering terribly." Jesus did not answer a word, so his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I will send only to the lost sheep. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Yes, it is, Lord," she said. "Even the dogs eat crumbs that fall from their master's table." When Jesus said to her, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted," and her daughter was healed at that moment. Jesus feeds 4,000. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds, great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw him, the mute speaking, the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they will collapse on the way." His disciples answered, "Where could we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. "7," they replied, "and a few small fish." He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and went and gave thanks and broke them and gave them to the disciples, and they turned to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken bread that were left over. Seven again, both times seven. Notice. The number of those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. Man, so what was it, like 10,000 really? Because it was like 4,000. Most men have at least one wife and a kid, probably to some degree. So after that, after Jesus had sent the crowd away, he got into the boat and went to the vicinity of Magnan. All right, so we'll finish up. We'll be doing let's see, 16, 17, see 16 to 19 tomorrow. So 3 chapters every day. So thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate you, and I'm out.